On the pitch-black night of December 11, 1942, 11 men in a mahogany boat smaller than a destroyer's gun turret decided to hunt a formation of 11 warships, proving that courage and a single torpedo could rewrite the rules of naval warfare forever. At 10:47 p.m., Lieutenant Lester Gamble throttled his PT-37 through the black waters off Guadalcanal, watching 11 Japanese destroyers move south. At 28 years old, Gamble had spent 5 months in the Solomons with 0 destroyers to his name. The lead ship in his sights was the Teruzuki, a 440-foot Akizuki-class destroyer carrying 8 rapid-fire guns and the newest fire control system in the Japanese fleet. Gamble's boat, by contrast, was 77 feet of plywood and mahogany, weighing only 40 tons fully loaded. His primary weapons were 3 Packard engines that screamed like banshees when pushed past 30 knots, and 4 Mark 8 torpedoes. It was a matchup of 2 twin 50-caliber machine guns against a destroyer 6 times longer, protected by armor plating and a crew of 350. The math was simple. PT boats died fast in the Solomons. Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 3 had already lost 4 boats in just 2 months, with 18 men killed and 23 wounded. The Japanese dismissed these vessels as mosquitoes, annoying but easy to swat. American sailors had a different word for charging destroyers in wooden boats: suicide. Yet the Tokyo Express was running again under Admiral Riso Tanaka, the man American forces called Tenacious Tanaka and the Japanese hailed as the master of night operations. For 6 months, Tanaka had slipped past air patrols to keep Japanese troops alive on an island that should have fallen in August. This was his 4th drum run in December, leading 11 destroyers carrying watertight drums filled with rice and ammunition to be dropped offshore for starving soldiers. Teruzuki was his flagship, chosen because it was a lethal veteran that had crippled the USS Starrett and helped sink the USS Laffey and USS Monson without taking a scratch. Unlike other destroyers that needed minutes to switch gun rolls, Teruzuki's dual-purpose guns could transition instantly. Behind Gamble's PT-37, 2 more boats, PT-40 and PT-48, carved white wakes through the darkness. 3 wooden boats with 12 total torpedoes were all that stood against a formation that had already proven it could destroy American warships built of steel. Gamble checked his crew of 11 men, ranging from 19 to 32 years old. They were motor machinist mates working in engine rooms that felt like ovens, and gunners manning weapons that often jammed from salt spray. They were all volunteers, and they all knew that wooden boats burned fast when hit by destroyer shells. The Japanese formation was moving at 12 knots, looking vulnerable but still capable of making evasive turns faster than a PT boat. Furthermore, Teruzuki's fire control could track targets in complete darkness. Marine dive bombers had attacked earlier that dusk, and despite 14 SBDs dropping their payloads, not a single hit was recorded. Tanaka had dropped his supply drums off Cape Esperance right on schedule and was now withdrawing north. Gamble watched the destroyer's profile through binoculars at a range of 2,300 yards. He throttled back to idle, and his sister boats did the same. 3 boats drifted in the darkness, waiting. Tanaka's lookouts scanned for the phosphorescent wakes that usually betrayed PT boats at high speed, but they saw nothing. Gamble's hand moved to the throttle. Each of his 4 Mark 8 torpedoes weighed 3,000 pounds and carried 600 pounds of Torpex explosive, enough to break a destroyer's keel if they ran straight and actually detonated. However, the Mark 8 had a notorious 60% failure rate in combat. Gamble needed to close to under 1,000 yards for a reliable shot, putting him within range of every gun on that destroyer. A single searchlight would turn PT-37 into a burning coffin in seconds. He pushed the throttles forward, not to full speed, but just enough to move at 18 knots. The water was calm, and cloud cover blocked the stars, perfect conditions for a torpedo attack, but terrible for seeing the target. His crew tracked Teruzuki by silhouette, estimating range and speed by eye because they had no radar or sonar. At 1,000 yards, the destroyer's profile grew massive. Teruzuki was third in the column, following the Arashi and Naganami. The ships were spaced 300 yards apart, a pattern good for avoiding submarines but terrible for mutual fire support. Gamble checked his angles. PT boat torpedoes were mounted in fixed tubes angled outward, meaning you didn't aim the weapon, you aimed the entire boat. He pointed the bow where the target would be in 60 seconds and prayed. As Teruzuki crossed his bow angle, he pressed the firing button for tubes 1 and 2. Twin blasts of compressed air sent the 3,000-pound weapons into the water. PT-37 lurched as the weight left the boat. Gamble didn't wait. He fired tubes 3 and 4 and then spun the wheel hard, shoving the throttles to maximum. The Packard engine screamed at 41 knots as the boat lifted onto plane. Behind him, the other PT boats were firing their salvos. 12 weapons were now in the water, but the Japanese had not reacted. No searchlights snapped on, no guns flashed. Tanaka's lookouts had missed the attack entirely. Gamble counted down the seconds in his head. 60, 30, 10, 5, impact. A massive detonation lit up the night. A column of water shot 200 feet into the air behind Teruzuki's main mast. The explosion was so bright that Gamble could see individual sailors on the enemy deck. The destroyer's stern lifted and twisted as ruptured fuel tanks ignited into orange flames. Teruzuki's forward guns opened fire, but they were shooting blindly at empty ocean because the fire control system had been knocked offline. One searchlight beam passed just 50 yards ahead of PT-37, close enough for Gamble to feel his heart stop, but it kept moving. Other destroyers began firing star shells and parachute flares, turning night into day. Gamble pushed his engines past their stops, the boat shaking so hard his teeth rattled. Behind them, the flagship of Rear Admiral Tanaka was burning from stem to stern, hit by a weapon launched from a boat made of wood. Admiral Tanaka had been thrown across the bridge by the blast, striking a metal stanchion and falling unconscious. His staff officers scrambled in the dark, lit only by the fires raging aft. The torpedo had shattered the engine room, smashed the propeller shaft, and destroyed the rudder. Oil spread across the water, turning the sea into a lake of fire. Teruzuki was dead in the water. While damage control teams fought the flames, sailors dragged the unconscious Tanaka to the starboard side. The destroyer Naganami maneuvered alongside to transfer the admiral. By 11:03 p.m., Tanaka's body was lifted across the gap between the ships. Within minutes, he was on Naganami's bridge while a Navy surgeon checked for brain hemorrhages. On the Teruzuki, ammunition for the machine guns started cooking off, sending tracers in random directions. The PT boats had vanished, leaving a 100-yard-long phosphorescent wake, but the Japanese were too focused on their burning flagship to pursue. Gamble and his fellow lieutenants had been incredibly lucky, escaping without a scratch after launching 12 torpedoes. But Teruzuki was still afloat. If the crew controlled the fires, the ship might be towed back for repairs. 4 miles north, 2 more PT boats, PT-44 and PT-110, were racing toward the flames with 8 fresh torpedoes. This was the moment PT boat doctrine lived for. The first attack creates chaos, and the second exploits it. Lieutenant Frank Freeland spotted the Japanese formation at 11:17 p.m. 7 destroyers were circling the crippled flagship while others picked up survivors. The Teruzuki was lit up like a beacon, with flames climbing 100 feet into the sky. Freeland selected his target, not the dying Teruzuki, but the Naganami, the ship that had taken Tanaka aboard. At 1,400 yards, Freeland fired 2 torpedoes and PT-110 fired 2 more. They turned hard at 40 knots, racing for the darkness. This time, Japanese lookouts spotted the wakes. Searchlights found PT-44 and held them in their beams. 5-inch shells began erupting in geysers of water around the wooden boat. Freeland zigzagged at 41 knots as shrapnel rattled against the hull. All 4 torpedoes from the second attack missed. 2 ran too deep, 1 veered off, and the last broached the surface before passing harmlessly by a destroyer.
Though the second attack failed to score a hit, it forced the Japanese to stop rescue operations and defend themselves, giving the fires on Teruzuki 10 more minutes to spread. By 11:42 p.m., the ship's captain, Commander Orita, faced a grim reality. The aft engine room was flooded, and the fire had reached the aft magazines where 72 depth charges, each packed with 300 pounds of explosives, were stored. Orita ordered the Kingston valves open to scuttle the ship. He didn't want to wait for the depth charges to turn his crew into shrapnel. 197 men were transferred to other destroyers, while 156 others began rowing for the shore of Guadalcanal. By midnight, Teruzuki was deserted and settling by the stern. Tanaka regained consciousness on the Naganami at 12:17 a.m. When he looked out at his flagship, he saw a floating inferno with its bow in the air. At 4:40 a.m. on December 12th, the fire finally reached the depth charge magazines. 72 charges detonated simultaneously in an explosion visible 20 miles away. The massive orange fireball turned night into day, and the resulting shockwave was strong enough to knock men off their feet on nearby ships. Teruzuki's stern simply ceased to exist, sending metal fragments the size of automobiles flying in every direction. The bow section rolled to port and slid beneath the surface 17 seconds later. 3,759 tons of steel were gone in less than a minute. Tanaka watched in silence. His career at sea was over. Tokyo decided that losing a flagship to PT boats was unacceptable, and he was reassigned to land duty in Burma. 6 months of success were erased by one torpedo hit from a 77-foot boat made of plywood.
The loss was more than symbolic. Teruzuki was an Akizuki-class destroyer, a ship so expensive and complex that it would take 18 to 24 months to replace. For the Americans, the victory was enormous. PT boats had finally proven they could kill a major warship. Admiral Chester Nimitz sent a message of congratulations, ignoring the fact that many commanders had been debating if wooden boats even belonged in modern warfare. The sinking of the Teruzuki answered that question. While the Tokyo Express continued for 2 more months, the runs became more cautious and less frequent. Tanaka's replacement lacked his aggressive instincts, and Japanese forces on Guadalcanal received 20% less supplies in January than they had in December. That 20% was the difference between holding the island and losing it. By February 1943, the Japanese evacuated Guadalcanal in what they called a strategic withdrawal, but was in reality their first major defeat of the war. Lieutenant Gamble returned to Tulagi that morning with empty fuel tanks and an exhausted crew. Intelligence confirmed the kill 3 days later through radio intercepts. PT-37, the boat that sank the largest warship ever taken down by a PT boat, had been built in Bayonne, New Jersey for just $85,000. The Teruzuki had cost $3 million. You could build 35 PT boats for the price of one Akizuki-class destroyer. The PT-37 was constructed from 2 layers of mahogany planking with no metal framework. While the hull could stop a rifle bullet, a 5-inch shell would turn the entire boat into splinters. The 3 Packard engines burned high-octane aviation gasoline, making the boats floating firebombs. Crews called the fuel tanks the coffin makers. Even the Mark 8 torpedoes were unreliable, with gyroscopes that failed and depth controls that malfunctioned, but when they worked, they were lethal. The torpedo that hit Teruzuki struck the worst possible location, the aft engine room, where all propulsion systems converged. PT-37 survived for 7 more weeks after its historic kill. On February 1, 1943, while on patrol in the same waters, it was spotted by the Japanese destroyer Kawakaze. The first salvo missed, but the second landed directly on target. 5-inch shells punched through the mahogany and detonated in the engine compartment. PT-37 exploded and sank in under 2 minutes. Gamble and his crew survived and were picked up by another boat, but the vessel that had changed naval history was gone. The irony was clear. Wooden boats could kill destroyers, but destroyers could kill wooden boats much more easily. The exchange rate, however, favored the Americans. 1 PT boat for 1 elite destroyer was a trade the Navy would make every time.
Tanaka spent the rest of the war in frustration, watching younger officers lead operations he felt he should have commanded. The tactical lessons from that night influenced naval doctrine for decades. The concept of small, fast attack craft using hit-and-run tactics was studied by every major navy, from the Soviet torpedo boats of the Cold War to the missile boats used in the 1973 Arab-Israeli War. Even today, fast attack craft tactics are descendants of what happened in the Solomons. The wreck of the Teruzuki remained undiscovered for 83 years until July 2025, when it was located at a depth of 2,600 feet in Iron Bottom Sound. The bow section lies separate from the stern, with gun turrets still pointed toward the sky. The rusted depth charges that finished the ship are still visible, a silent testament to how the destroyer died. Lester Gamble survived the war and returned to the United States, rarely speaking of the night of December 11th. He died in 1993, his obituary mentioning his Navy Cross, but not the fact that he had commanded a boat that fundamentally changed the way navies thought about small craft warfare. Ultimately, the legacy of the Teruzuki is a human one. 11 men on a wooden boat chose to attack 11 destroyers, knowing the risks and the overwhelming odds. They launched their torpedoes anyway, stopping a supply run, disrupting an enemy formation, and contributing to a strategic victory that shifted the momentum of the Pacific War. It wasn't superior technology or numerical strength that won the night. It was courage, a plan, and just enough luck to make both matter. These stories of real heroism from the dusty archives of history remind us that size doesn't always guarantee victory. If this story moved you, please hit the like button to help us share more forgotten accounts from World War II. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a rescue from the archives. Drop a comment and let us know where you are watching from, whether it's the United States, the United Kingdom, or beyond. You are part of keeping these memories alive and ensuring that men like Lester Gamble and his crew are never forgotten.